So when did turning into a chair become about greed, and would we actually capitalize on the end of the world? Also, how many of you realized you actually needed to see a stop frame rat in people clothes? All these questions and hopefully more will be answered in this episode of Terror and Tea. Wish me luck with this one, guys. Stay tuned. Hello, you beautiful creatures. How the devil are you? I hope you are well. If you're new here, my name is Lou, or Lucifer, as my friends like to call me. By my friends, I mean my Instagram account. Hello, I am back. Also, if you are a regular here, I've decided to name all my horror movie review videos. I want this to be a thing. I want this to be a big thing. I want to do this on the regular, and I got the idea Terror and Tea from, obviously most of these are going to be horror reviews. Also tea. I drink a lot of tea. I love tea. It's a no secret to anybody that I love tea. Also, tea is like gossiping sessions, and I really love the idea of this being like our little cozy session about talking about horror movies, this, that and the other. If you really like the name, please let me know. If you don't like the name, please don't tell me, because originality is dead and I really like the name. But we are here because of a new horrendous movie that has just come out. This is the new anthology, The House, on Netflix, and guys, oh, this one was a hard one. It's basically what would happen if you told a Sylvanian family to go to the Amityville house or the Warrens Museum. That's basically the takeaway from this. It is a 3-part anthology. There are 3 stories. They're all different styles. So the first one, it's needle felted. Like, I do that. I make stuff like that, and I lost it. I really did. Like, before I get into the kind of review side of it, I just want to say the artwork for all of this was absolutely amazing, but more specifically the first story, because again, I do needle felting, and the fact that somebody has done all of that. I mean, the scenes and the sets, they set a fireplace on fire and the fire's needle felted. I really loved it, but it is one of the stories that disturbed me the most. Then we move on to the second one with stop frame animation, mice, rats. It gets dark, it gets really dark. And the third one with an ensemble of cats and talking about the end of the world. So what I'm going to do, I am going to basically give you a mini recap of all 3 stories, and I'm going to talk about the stories individually with their different themes, and then I'm going to kind of do an umbrella theme, if that's okay, and then basically do a closing, how I enjoyed them, how I didn't enjoy them, what I took away from it, what I didn't take away from it. I hope that's okay with you guys, and I'm going to try and get this to as little time as possible, because I know some of my reviews, they can be a little bit longer. However, I do like to try and go as in depth as possible with these reviews, certainly with stuff like The House, just because there's so much to unpack. If you haven't seen it, I would fully recommend watching it. This is going to be a spoiler-filled video. If you haven't watched it and you want to watch this to see if you'd like it or if you're a bit scared by it, I mean, the trailer dropped in December and it was terrifying. I hated it. I really hated it. My friend actually watched it before me, and I just thought, I've got to get it out the way. So if you're watching it because of that reason, that's absolutely fine, but you know, stop and then go and watch it. If you like Inside Number 9 on BBC, I would fully recommend this for you because it is phenomenal. So we're going to get into The House, guys, and this is going to be a hard one. Before we get into the stories, what is The House? The House is a Netflix movie that has just come out. It was either a week ago or 2 weeks ago. The trailer did actually drop in December, and it was horrifying. It was terrible, with the images of people with really tiny faces and cockroach dances and the end of the world. I can understand why people were immediately drawn to this. Also, it's got a slew of directors. Each one has got a different director, and we've got a pretty decent cast as well. Helena Bonham Carter, I love that woman, and even though she was voice acting, you could definitely tell it was her, and the character really suited her. So what is The House about? Even though The House is 3 separate stories, they do actually interlink. The house stays the same, the themes kind of stay the same. Before I get into the first story, there is an overlaying theme of greed. It's a massive one, and this movie is basically a love letter about how greedy we are as people and how wrong everything is in the world, and it sucks. It really does. Does it help that most of the stories are done by anthropomorphic creatures? I don't know. It doesn't really soften the deal that it's basically aimed at humanity and that it's about consumerism. There's a massive thing about consumerism on this one, and how much money means to us, even in the most direst situations, what kind of situations that money can put us in. It really is a terrifying tale. So the first story is titled "And Heard Within, a Life is Spun." This is the one that kind of disturbed me the most. It was on a similar vein of the second story. So I'm going to try and do a quick recap for you guys in case you haven't watched it, in case you have watched it and you do need it recapping. We are introduced to this family. I'm not sure if it's in the 18th century, the 17th or 16th. However, they're in poverty. You have Mabel, who is the oldest of the children, Isabel, who's the littlest child. She's adorable, Raymond the father, and Penny the mother. Now, they are preparing for a visit from Raymond's relatives, and it turns out that Raymond actually came from a long line of either aristocracy or really, really rich people, and the fact that his family kind of see him in squalor, it doesn't sit well with any of the family. It really doesn't. And it's a shame, because when you look at this family and look at what they've got, it's adorable. It's an adorable little cottage. It is cozy, but it's big enough for all of them, and they're all happy. However, the monetary situation comes in again, the greed situation. Raymond gets angry, he gets drunk, he goes into a stupor, he leaves into the woods. Now, I'm totally gonna wreck this guy's name, so you're gonna have to bear with me. He finds this guy called Mr. Van Schoonbeek. Schoonbeek? I really hope it's Schoonbeek. Someone's going to tell me it's completely wrong. But he finds this mysterious caravan in the middle of the woods that isn't pulled by horses, and he meets Mr. Van Schoonbeek, and it kind of draws away from it. And then he comes back into his house and tells Penny, "Oh my god, all of our troubles are over," this, that and the other. But before he can tell her, he falls asleep. The next morning they get a guest, and his name is Mr. Thomas, and he is the supposed butler for Mr. Van Schoonbeek. I don't know what his name is. I'm so sorry. So anyway, Mr. Thomas tells them that it turns out that Raymond has made a deal with this weird guy in the woods, and the deal is that they can go and live in this house that I'm going to call him Mr. Van from now on. That Mr. Van is basically going to build from the ground up with no charges whatsoever. Note, there is a contract involved, and I can't tell if they read the contract or not, but they honestly feel like they've got nothing else to give, so they sign the contract, and I hate that. I really, really hate that. So after a couple of weeks, the house is ready. They move in straight away. Obviously, it's amazing. It's wonderful. It's got all the up-to-date gadgets, the latest gadgets and gizmos. So like lamps that turn on their own, gas lamps, no more candlelight. Food is provided for them, even though they don't know where the servants are or what happens, but it's all provided to them for free, provided that they give up their house. And they're kind of just left to it. But unfortunately, the parents get a little bit obsessed with the monetary value of it, the greed side of it. They're obsessed with this house. They can't comprehend these gas lights on the wall, and they find this fireplace and they just stare into it. But it's weird because Raymond can't actually light it, but there's a reason for that. And it's obvious that they have immediately become obsessed with the house. However, the children, they haven't. Isabel and Mabel, I really like Mabel. Mabel's wonderful. They're not swayed by the house, and that's mainly because they're children. They don't really see the monetary side of it. They were quite content in their own house, and it's been taken away from them, so they basically go to bed without their parents saying anything to them. We then see that the parents have become obsessed with certain objects. So Raymond's become obsessed with the fireplace, whereas Penny has become obsessed with a sewing machine she used to sew back at her own place, and now she's seen this machine, she's Again, she's obsessed with it. They are given clothes by Mr. Van, and these clothes, let me tell you, I'm not a fashionable person myself. I'm really not a fashionable person. And they're basically cushions, and they're drapes. They're curtain drapes. They are curtains, but there's a reason for it. They look like part of the house. They look like furniture. Mabel doesn't like it, and the parents kind of have a little go at her, this, that and the other. But whilst all this is going on, turns out Mr. Van isn't done with them. He actually converts the house multiple times a day. There's always workmen inside the house. They never stop building, and so it essentially becomes a labyrinth that never ever ends. So Isabel and Mabel, they go off on their own. They go down into the cellar and they find their old house. It has been preserved within the house. They find comfort in that, so they stay in that house, but they can't stay there forever. Hunger takes over and they need to go back, and this is awful. There is a specific scene where they're walking up this lot of stairs from the basement into the main house, and Mr. Thomas is kind of watching them, and he's like shaking and crying, and it's horrible. And Mr. Van, a bigger version of him, kind of comes out of the shadow, so it's almost like he's this child and the house is basically a massive doll house. Also, I forgot to mention that Mabel did used to have a doll house in the previous house, and it was still within the previous house within the new house. I really hope that makes sense. It's a house within a house within a house. They realise that the stairs have been taken. Mabel and Isabel, they can't get down, they can't get to their parents. So they see Raymond is actually taking pieces of the original house, because Mr. Thomas has told him that his original house is down below and he can take all of that. And we gradually see that Raymond is taking pieces of his original self and he's burning them and becoming more and more and more involved in the new house. Isabel and Mabel, where are they? They can't find a way down, and they actually find Mr. Thomas in one of the rooms. Turns out, shock horror, he's an actor that's been employed by Mr. Van to feed these lies to this poor family. We didn't see that one coming. I personally didn't see it coming, but it was disturbing to see him so shaken and so damaged and just surrounded by all of this alcohol. I really didn't like it. Anyway, they eventually get down and they go into the living room and their parents aren't there. Yeah. They get closer to the fire, turn around, and what is this? One of the chairs starts speaking to them. It's Raymond, and a curtain starts speaking as well, and it's Penny. The parents have literally become a part of the house, and the last piece to go into the fire that Raymond throws into the fire is Mabel's dollhouse, and it catches fire. It starts to catch fire in the living room. The parents beg the children to leave and they go. We don't know what happens to the girls. It's left very open-ended. We have no idea, but it is sad. It is so incredibly sad, but I said that it's a glorified version of saying this is the worst thing that can happen if you sign something without reading the terms and conditions. Like, you can sign something and then a week later John Wick turns up at your house and he's got to mow you down because of something it said in the terms and conditions. This is why you read them. It was awful. I think this is very much Mr. Van is some kind of devil, some kind of demon, because it's signing a contract. It's that thing of signing your life away, and it's very relatable to this day and age. We sign things all the time, especially when it comes to money, especially when it comes to objects, and we don't know the full extent of what we're signing or what we're giving away. They basically gave away their lives to this Mr. Van guy, and it was too good to be true. Anything that is too good, it can't be true. And that's the main takeaway from this. You can't expect to have something handed to you on a silver plate if you don't work for it, or if you don't know what the cost of that is. And unfortunately for the family, for Raymond, that was his life. It also has a massive play of greed as well. We as adults, we as people, it's a taught behaviour. It really is, that our status increases, our name has more value to it when we have a bigger property, when we have more things. I won't lie to you, a lot of YouTubers, they're looking for the next big thing, the next big Loungefly, the next big subscription box. They want to be the first people to get it. Yes, I'm calling myself out, I know I'm part of the problem, but it's horrible to see. It really is. This whole anthology is basically telling us how wrong human behavior is and how corrupt we have become as people, and it's really, really sad. It also shows the hell of greed, I believe. So you see it from the parent side, but you also see it from the kid side as well. And I can hear a lot of you saying, but they didn't turn into furniture. Yes, however, their parents did. They saw their parents become something inhuman and become obsessed over something, and as a child, that is horrible to see. If you know that it's like religion, like no false idol, you should not worship a false idol. It's a little bit like the same thing. You know, you're a child, you've got your parents, and you realise that your parents are spending more time with an object or something than they are taking care of you. Am I saying that from a personal experience? Absolutely I am, and I can say honestly that it's one of the worst experiences you will ever feel. You feel abandoned, you don't feel like you're worth anything, and it sucks. And that's basically the kids going through their own personal hell. And I also think certainly Mr. Van, he's a big example of people taking advantage of you during a moment of weakness. We've all been there where we've been incredibly low on money and we've had loan sharks, credit cards, lots of credit cards, and they promise flourish things. They promise they'll get you out of a bad situation, but they don't, because you've got to pay for things. And unfortunately, some people, they're so obsessed with buying things and wanting things that they put themselves in more of a worse situation. And I believe that Mr. Van is the representation of something like that. There are companies out there that are there to basically take advantage of a bad monetary situation. I know it's horrible to say, and it basically says that there are people out there that are willing to take advantage of you when you're at your lowest, and that really, really sucks. All in all, this mini story, I absolutely adored it. It terrified me so much. The idea that this man had such power, and there's even a bit at the start where Mr. Thomas says to Raymond, oh, it's okay, money isn't an issue for Mr. Van, it's of no consequence to him. How nuts is that, to know that there are people out there that money has little consequence to, and then on the flip side you've got these poor people where they're desperate for money and they've got nothing else to their name. So how is Raymond expected to pay for this house? They're none other than his life. His life is the price for it. Now I'm thinking, this is more of an overview for the rest of the stories. However, I'm thinking that because Mr. Van made the house, does that mean that the kind of curse, the idea of it, like the trauma, the horror of it, continues to every other tenant of the house? Because from the rest of the stories, they are in the same house and they all suffer horrible fates. Well, the third one not so much. The third one's more of a potential positive ending, but the second one is definitely not, and we're going to get into that right now. This one makes me feel sick. The next one is, then lost is the truth that can't be won. If you've seen the trailer, you know exactly why I'm shuddering. It's intense. It really is intense. It's more disturbing and eerie than any of the two, I think. Well, I think the first one and the second one are on a similar vein. So we get this second character, and I think he's called the developer. He actually doesn't give a name. He's just known as a developer. If that's different, please let me know in the comments. But this developer, this poor guy, you can tell that he's down on his luck already, but he has put his heart and soul into making this house. He's basically re-renovated the house that's in the first story, and he's a little rat, and it's really cute, but I hate it because it's cute and it leads you into a false sense of security. I mean, I'm an entertainer, and some of the entertainment we do, it is children's programs and whatnot, so seeing these kind of children-esque vignettes, cussing, that stresses me out. Like, the juxtaposition of it all, really, it works incredibly well, and I can't wait to see more. Why I say I can't wait to see more is because if you look on IMDb, it says 2022 with a dash and then leaves a space, so I'm thinking there's going to be more. Anyway, we're left with this guy, this developer, and he's finally renovated this house, and it looks okay, it looks good. A lot of it is new gadgets and gizmos, and I really hate that, but we'll get into that shortly. So he's basically organised for this party of people to kind of come around, have a look at the house, ask him any questions, and potentially get a buyer for this house. He's put all of his money and his life into this house, which is a big warning, a big red flag. He even calls an estranged lover, turns out it's his dentist, to say, oh yeah, it's okay, once this house is sold, we're going to Barbados or something like that. I don't know, they're thinking of going somewhere, and it doesn't go well. You can see from the get-go, so before the housewarming even begins, he has a cockroach problem, and I don't like cockroaches. I don't like cockroaches because they were in Creepshow, and they're bad news. They eat people. But he has a cockroach problem, and instead of dealing with the problem like a responsible adult, he seals up the bottoms of the floors where the cockroaches go into. He gets some cockroach repellent powder, I think it is, or cockroach extermination powder, and he just mows them all down with it. And there's a scene of him, he's asleep, and he's surrounded by all these dead cockroaches and lava. It's disgusting. They're disgusting. I don't like it. The next morning is the housewarming party, and it just keeps going wrong. So he orders a load of canapes, but it turns out it's just Monster cans and energy drink and snacks. So he makes canapes out of them, which is really, really funny. But nobody cares. Nobody actually cares. He dresses himself up, he's all swanky, he's all neat, he's all clean, he's Mr. I'm amazing and I've done all this, but nobody cares because it's a gimmick. The whole thing is a gimmick. He's put multicolored lights in the kitchen that you can like change on your smartphone. Sound familiar? Yeah, I bet it does. Yeah, he's done all of that. Like, the bathroom is a jacuzzi, and it's not what it is. That's the problem. He hasn't respected the foundation of the building. He's just made a botched job of it and hoped that he would get money out of it. But it turns out, again, he's in a lot of debt. He's literally used up all of his money. He's taken out a horrendous amount of loans. He keeps getting called from the bank, and nobody's biting. Until an odd couple turn up, and I hate that I didn't notice the shape of them. Anyway, this odd couple, they look very strange. They don't look like the similar rat folk that went to the housewarming party or anything like that. One of them's incredibly tall, whilst one of them's incredibly short and quite wide. And they like the house. Of course they like the house, but they're strange. They are strange people. Turns out they like the house so much that they want to stay the night. And because he hasn't got any grounds to stand on, he hasn't got a leg to stand on, he needs this cell. He lets them stay the night. And they keep saying, oh yeah, we're interested, of course we're interested. They're so cheeky. They say, oh yeah, can we have a cup of tea? And he makes it for them. But it turns out that he's living in the basement, and he's living in awful conditions. He's got a camping bed set up, and that's all his life is. And he can hear the cockroaches at night. I hated that part, really hated that part. But it shows how he's tried to cover up a massive problem with a smaller solution, and that massive problem's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That cockroach infestation's had a chance to get bigger, and because of that, his situation, it's getting worse. He can hear them in the walls, he can see them on the floors, and it's a wonderful shot because it's a shadow that's slowly creeping over the basement. And the only little bit of light is just around him. It's a tiny ball of light. So he doesn't like the fact that these people are staying in his house that they haven't bought, so he calls the police. Anyway, turns out, subplot, that the estranged lover, he kept calling them even though they're not really a thing, and the police come over and say, can you stop harassing this person? I don't know, really weird. But another problem is, you know, on top of the developer's pile. And then he answers the door again, and it turns out that the odd couple have invited their family. Woo! Did I forget the cockroach dance before that? Yeah, I forgot the cockroach dance. So before all that kind of happens, he's down in the basement. He's like whizzing. He falls over. This is when the cockroach thing is kind of, you know, closing in on him. He falls over and he just kind of starts to lose it, and then cockroaches and lava come out of the air vents and they start dancing. It's a good number. It's a great number. Look, I don't know what happened. I'm just trying to review the thing, okay? I really enjoyed it. As a musical theatre fan, I thought it was phenomenal. The choreography was great. Loved it. 10 out of 10. We'll talk about it later. So back to where I was previously at. The odd couple have invited their family over, and they say a comment that's quite strange, because they say, we were here before you were. Very strange, very, very strange. If anyone wants to pick up on that, let me know. But he loses it. He loses his mind, and he gets the cockroach repellent and he yeets it at them, all of them, but he ingests some of it and he passes out. He ends up at the hospital and the bank's calling him. This guy can't catch a break. The bank calls him and he just doesn't answer. Not from personal experience, but when you've got a problem or a situation and it keeps calling you and you're just like, no, I understand that on a spiritual level. Anyway, the odd couple pick him up. What? The odd couple pick him up and say it's time to take them home, and he goes home in his hospital gown. He's not wearing any clothes. Great, love that. And he goes home and he's greeted by the odd couple's family, but they're different. So they've all grown extra limbs and they're looking very similar to a certain insect, e.g. cockroaches and lava. How did that happen? I don't know. And it's pandemonium after that. It's basically this colony of mutant rats has taken over the house. They're eating everything. Everything's in shambles. Like, they're eating the sofa, they're eating all of the technology, they're eating the wire work. This poor fish, it was in a fish tank and now it's dead. That was a sad bit. But it pans to this cooker that the developer was really proud of, even though it was awful. It was shocking. It's something you would get off Wish. And the cooker opens and the developer, in a regressed state, comes out and he's basically a rat, physically and mentally, has a little bit of a nibble of something and goes back into a hole he's dug in the cooker. Take away whatever you want from that. And I hated it so much, not because it was bad, not because it was badly told. I thought it was phenomenally told. Again, the animation was wonderful. The stop frame animation was peak. It looked beautiful, crisp, clean. I hated it because it emphasized how much money can mess with your mental health. So this guy was basically going downhill anyway before anything even started. He put his eggs in one basket, all of them, and it's a cautionary tale about that. Like, ideas are great, ideas are wonderful things, and I love it when people come up with things, but make sure it's going to work first, because you don't know how much it's going to cost you. If you invest so much into this idea and it falls through, what are you left with? Nothing. He had a terrible framework mentally. You could see that he was on his last leg anyway. He was desperate for this deal to go through. However, it didn't, and he just slowly descended into madness to a point where he just regressed. And you see it everywhere. You really do. I hate to say it, but homeless people, I feel like they regress to alcohol. They turn to alcohol and it kills your mind. So what are you left with? Nothing. And I think it's also a comment on, don't leave a problem until the last minute. With the cockroach problem, he put sealant up the walls. He used pesticides for a little bit, but left them to fester because he was trying to cover up this whole problem with something shiny, swanky, new. Basically, he was putting a suit on the house, and it didn't end well. It's like putting a plaster on a gaping wound. More specifically, a financial wound. Also, I think it has a lot to do with responsibility. I've seen a lot of memes about not wanting to be responsible anymore, and it's mainly aimed at, I feel that sometimes I still feel like a child, and I'm 25. It's mainly aimed at kind of our generation and the generation after, like, what is responsibility? I don't know how to adult. So it's like getting one of us to buy a house and renovate it, waste all of our money, and it to fall through, and I feel attacked. I really do feel attacked. Life doesn't seem to be as simple as it used to be. You know, you hear all these stories from your parents, your grandparents about how stable their lives used to be and how forward everything was, but now things don't feel that way. And because we're not really taught the skills to deal with those situations, we've got no other choice but to fall through. And before I go on to the third segment, I think I just want to say that as an empath, watching this one was horrible, because even though it said that it was meant to be funny, there were funny bits, but it just didn't feel funny. It felt like this poor guy was just having things happen to him because they could. Like, it was like watching like a skit where things progressively get worse and worse and worse, but at the end there's no payoff where things get better for him. And again, it is a sad comment on a lot of people's situations. There are a lot of people in this world, and I don't know, maybe it could be seen as a form of unaliving himself, because he got rid of who he was to become a lesser being that couldn't be hurt. And that sounds very similar to me, that these situations were constantly happening to him and nothing was getting better, and he was trying and trying and trying, albeit it wasn't the best way of trying, and he didn't really try in the right way. He didn't, you know, address situations when they could have been addressed. He could have dealt with problems when they were basically a molehill and they become a mountain. But it was sad. It was really sad. And unfortunately, it's a sad truth that there are a lot of people out there where that does happen to them. You know, they try so much, and no matter what they do, things don't seem to get better. I mean, talking personally, Gareth, he hasn't had a lot of luck in the past couple of years, and it just felt like every single turn it was just bad news after bad news after bad news, and it was horrible to watch. It's heartbreaking to watch, and it didn't feel like there was any give, there was any let up. So seeing this developer just have no choice but to mentally regress, yeah, it was really sad. If you are deeply empathetic, I would definitely skip this one. But hopefully the next one has a little bit of light to it. The third one is called Listen Again and Seek the Sun. And even listening to the title, like when it came on screen, I thought, my God, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The last two were so oppressive and horrible, and there was no way out of these situations. However, with the last story, there was a way out, and I was so grateful. We followed the story of Rosa. She's a strong, independent cat lady, and I love her so much. But it's set in a post-apocalyptic future, and Rosa now has the house, and she is a landlady to a shy black cat called Elias and her out-of-this-world other tenant called Jen, and she is voiced by Helena Bonham Carter. Jen, not Rosa. And it's the end of the world. Woohoo! We knew it was coming. This house, as it pans across the screen, there is just water everywhere. it's covering everything, and unless your house was on top of a hill or really high, you were going down. And there's mist, there's a very heavy mist as well, but the land is just so serene and beautiful and wonderful, and it was so nice to just have a setting that was so open and bright and wonderful after how oppressive the other two were. The first one was set very heavily inside the house. It always seemed dark and oppressive. The second one, you don't see a lot of the outside world, but you don't feel like you can see it anyway because it's just so dark and so sad. But this third one, this is the funniest one out of all three of them. It did advertise itself as a dark comedy, but I didn't find the first two funny at all. I really didn't. You got to be severely messed up to laugh at those ones, and I am messed up, so you know, good luck. But it follows the story of Rosa, and she's trying to renovate the house again. The house, she's trying to renovate the house, she's trying to make it better. It's always been a dream of hers. I think she's had the house in her family since the start. However, because there aren't any building materials anymore, because there's no money coming in anymore, she can't get the materials to do it anyway. However, everything's underwater, so even if she did have the money, how does that work? But I'll get into that in a little bit. So Elias always pays her in fish, and Jen always pays her in crystals, and I feel attacked because if I had my way, that's how my house would look. It is beautiful, it is wonderful, the animation is gorgeous, how the fur flows on all the characters is just beautiful. And then we meet Cosmo, or Cosmos, and he's like a lynx cat. He is wonderful, he is wild, he is feral, and he is Jen's spirit partner. They transcend being partners in general, and he's just, oh, he's wonderful, but he sees things differently to Rosa, and Rosa doesn't like that. She's based in reality, she's based in facts, she's based in money, and so there are odds and ends. However, Cosmos turns around and says, well, if I can't pay you in rent, I can pay you in my carpentry, which she loves because she wants to get the house renovated anyway. She shows him what she wants doing, he has other ideas. We go to the next day. Turns out that Cosmos has taken out all the floorboards on the second floor, and he's fashioned a boat for Elias. Elias did actually want to leave, which is really sad because I was really rooting for Elias and Rosa. Turns out he wanted to leave for a long time. He just didn't want to hurt her feelings. And it gets to a point where the waters are rising, like whilst Elias is leaving, the water is coming up to the top of their little dobians, the top of their paws. They're watching him go, and they're stood in the water, and they know the inevitable is going to happen. The water's going to rise so much that it's going to take the house anyway, but Rosa's adamant she's staying. And it gets to a point where even Jen says she's leaving. She's leaving with Cosmos because she knows that the house is going to go. And when she does leave with Cosmos, Rosa has these horrible visions of Elias and Jen sitting on the sofa laughing together without her, having a great time without her, and then her being sat on the sofa and just crying and being alone, and it really tears at your heartstrings. Turns out that whilst Cosmos was there, he was actually fashioning the house into a boat for her, which is really sweet. He puts a sign up, he puts this big illuminated sign up, and Rosa goes off on a mad one about him, but he says, oh yeah, you know, it's a lever, you just need to use a little bit of bodily force and it'll go. I love him, I really do love him. And she does, and it turns into a boat, and they all sail off into the sun together, and she releases herself from the house. Yes, it is a boat, but she releases herself from the concept of the house being stationary. There is even a point where she says to the house, I want to go, please let me go. And I thought that was beautiful, I really did. It was short but sweet, and it was by far nowhere near as horrible as the other two were. And I think it was a fantastic palate cleanser, it really was. After the first two, it really seemed to go on a roller coaster. So the first one, the children made it out. The second one, nobody made it out. Like, that was their fate. It was awful. And then we had the joy of, it's okay, there's a chance to get out of this. But the thing that really baffled me, and you see it in a lot of post-apocalyptic movies, particularly zombie apocalypse movies, if you see where people have set up camps and whatnot, they still want money. Money is still a thing. Society has basically crumbled around you and you still want money. It was a massive comment on it in the house in the third one that Elias was giving Rosa food. He was going out and he was catching fish from the water for her to survive, and yet she still didn't see that as payment. Jen was giving her stones so that she could use those as materials. You know, she still didn't appreciate it, and it just goes to show how corrupt we are when it comes to money, that we still feel like we need money to live. So for the start of this year, I decided that I wasn't going to spend money every day, and it's been hard. It's been really hard. However, I've gotten out of that rut now where I am spending money every day, and I'm spending money like once every 3 days or once every 4 days, and my mindset has become so much more clear. Like, it's not clouded by money anymore. And I feel so much better for it, and it's just sad that we've gotten to this point where money has got such a massive tie on our lives. Money is everything. People say that money can't make you happy. Well, unless you want to be on the streets with nothing to your name, without a roof over your head or a bed to sleep in or food, then I'm sorry, but yeah, it does give you some degree of happiness, but it shouldn't be to the point where we're making these kinds of deals. We're coming up with these stupid ideas. We're putting all of our money into one basket. We're trying to renovate something that's never going to come to fruition. That's the thing, that's the kicker. It shows us as quintessentially people, and it shows that we have a choice. We can either fall into those greed traps or we can't. And we can be a lot more cautious. We can enjoy life a lot more without those ties to money. I also picked up on the idea that the house kind of symbolized a toxic relationship, particularly in the third one. Now, if you've been in a toxic relationship, you know exactly what that's like. And I liken it to holding on to a rose. Now, the rose looks beautiful. However, it's got thorns, and the more you hold on to it, the more the thorns hurt you. And I felt that very similarly for Rosa in the house in the third story. She was giving all of this to a house that couldn't give her anything back. She was holding on to a toxic relationship when she had all of these wonderful supports around her. The value of friendship in the third story was beautiful, it really was. And it just goes to show that no matter how dark something might be, or a place might get, or a situation might get, as long as you've got people around you that love and care and support you and want to be there for you, you can get out of any situation, no matter how hard it is. It almost seemed impossible for Rosa, like the fact that the water was coming in, the smoke was coming in, and she was going to die, but the fact that her friends had fashioned something for her to save her, and she got to go off into the sunset with them. She didn't know whether she was going to make it the next day or not. They basically now live a life of, we'll take it day by day, we won't take it by week, and it was more about appreciating things day by day. So almost going back to the beginning of the three stories, the family, they came from nothing and they went day by day. They didn't know what was going to happen, but they were happy and they survived together. To again, at the end of the third story, the friends going off, surviving day by day, not knowing what was going to happen. So it basically became a full circle, that there was so much corruption and hatred in this house and greed, but they managed to finally break the cycle. Yes, it did take decades, because each story is centered in a certain decade, a certain year. The middle one was in kind of our time, I believe. The last one was in post-apocalyptic, whenever. We don't know when the end of the world's going to be. And again, I suppose we are all just taking things day by day, and we'll see what happens. All in all, I can absolutely not recommend this film enough. I adored the house so much more than I thought I would. I'm not gonna lie, it terrified me. I do suffer from night terrors, and sometimes I do actually see things from the house staring back at me, particularly the cockroach dance. If you thought it meant something else, please tell me, because I'd love to know. I love these conversations. I really love these conversations. If you want to start a conversation about what you felt something meant, then please let me know, because I love that. Would I say it's a horror? Yeah, I would. And it's one of the most horrific horrors I'd seen in a while, because it played on certain things. It made me feel uncomfortable. It made me feel very uncomfortable. Not just because of the themes that it presented, but because of the way that it was presented. The animation style, the lighting style, the music style was, oh, I hated it so much. There's a certain kind of music that plays at the end of the second one where it's been infested, the house has been infested, and I can't get it out of my head. It's awful though, it's really awful. And the music in the first one is stifling. The lighting in the first one is stifling. It really plays with shadow work in the first one. And I like that, particularly for the parents, the features, as they kind of morphed into the house, their features disappeared. So is that basically saying that the more greedy we become, the more possessions we have, we basically base our value on our possessions and not on our integrity, not on our personality, not who we are as people. Like, they lost their eyebrows and their faces shrunk and everything, and then they just turned into furniture, and I really didn't know what was going on, and it was really messed up. But we roll with it, and I felt horrendously sorry for the kids. I really did. Being in that position, I know exactly how it feels when, you know, your parents, they take a liking to something and they might forget you're there and you're worth it, but, you know, it is what it is. I would particularly recommend it to people who like Inside Number 9. I would recommend it to people who like anthologies. I would recommend it to people who like a little bit of a twist at the end of their films, who like a bit of a cautionary tale. We don't have enough of those nowadays, I don't think. A lot of horror movies are based around, oh no, she made the wrong choice by answering the phone or running that way or doing that. However, these are deeper lessons for us of, be careful what you do with your money, or be careful how engrossed you become in owning objects. And I love that. I really love that. I love things that make me feel visibly uncomfortable, because I feel like I'm being called out, because I'm reminded that I am a greedy person. We all are, in some shape or form. We've got such a culture of, even though I've got all of this, I want more, and I hate that so much. I really do. I'm desperately trying to get out of that mindset. I really am. But it's hard because it's been ingrained into us. It's a learned behaviour for all of us from a young age. I don't know about you, but particularly as a woman, when I was going to university, my mum would always say, marry somebody rich. Marry somebody rich, you'll be fine. Yeah, but why? But again, you know, it's the idea of, I'll be looked after, I'll want for nothing, and this, that and the other. My life will be filled with greed. I won't have to amount to anything. I won't have to work towards anything if I marry into a rich family. And that must be a massive pressure on guys. It really must, that if you can't amount to anything, like Raymond, if you can't amount to anything, if you can't live in the lap of luxury, if you can't have a wife that basically wants for nothing, or children that don't have to do anything and you feed all of their mouths, that's a massive stress on one person. So again, it does play on those gender roles. Life's stressful. That's the main takeaway from this. Life is very stressful, but like the third one said, as long as you realise that there's always another way of looking at things, there's always people that are out there there to help you. I mean, Cosmos, I love him so much as a character because he looked at the house and he saw potential, he saw something different. Now, it's very important to have people around you that have different mindsets and can see different potentials in different situations, because they might have an answer that you didn't necessarily think about, or be able to help you out of a situation because they saw something from a different angle. In the first and the second one, they were very, very like one-shot minded. They didn't see the bigger picture, and that's where the demise came in. They didn't seek the help, they didn't see the other options, they just saw one straight line and that's it. I'm gonna regress into a rat or a piece of furniture, I don't know. But I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. If you have seen the house, please let me know how disturbed you were, how undisturbed you were. If you weren't disturbed by it, then I don't know, you're a strange person. Also, let me know if you like this format, if you like the idea of Terror and Tea with Lucifer. I really like the name, I love the name. I can imagine a little teacup with horns and a little sugar cube that's a skull. I don't know, we're close to 500 subscribers as well, so I'm really happy about that. I've got loads of other reviews to do for you guys. I can't wait. This is very exciting for me. I hope you've had a good day. If not, that's okay. Always remember, tomorrow's a new day. See you later, guys. Bye.